boom ting.
Hello and welcome to another round of ballistic testing for the powered armoured exoskeleton project. Now, for anyone new to the channel, the idea of my armour for this suit of power armour is to have a 3D printed casing of which then is filled with composite armour and then attached onto a carbon fibre exoskeleton. I've been working out the best composition to use to fill into said 3D prints, with the main focus being on natural ceramics like porcelain, which in the previous video we tried, although there were some failures because the porcelain wasn't thick enough. I should have that sorted in this video. I'm also wanting to trial out different materials to complement the ceramic into the armour, while keeping it in the desired thickness of 20mm overall. But first we'll start with the ceramics. Now, I always designed this suit to be made out of many hexagonal tiles, these being good for basically limiting damage when a round hits it, these being the ceramic tiles I've used before in some ballistic testing. These are just regular porcelain tiles. The problem I've had with these is trying to find manufacturers who are consistent on thickness is quite a problem. And the thickness of the tile is the problems we had in the previous videos, meaning the armour didn't stop at the rounds that it was meant to do. So, to solve this issue, I originally wanted to make my own hexagonal ceramic tiles, custom sized and custom thickness. These are of a high quality porcelain, custom sized in-card using 3D printed moulds to press the porcelain clay into, meaning that these would come out 30mm in width and 7mm thick. The size that I worked out should be about perfect. The problem is, I couldn't get any of these kilned. I couldn't get any of these fired up to temperature to actually harden them, these just being chalky, as they are just air dried. So even though I made a bucket full of these, I haven't been able to use them simply because I can't get them hardened, and to buy a kiln for these that goes up to the right temperature is the best part of £5 grand. So as well as all these turned out to be and came out at, and I could even custom shape them to fit into the corners, etc., I can't use these. I'm going to have to find some porcelain ceramic that I can buy from a shop and use. I have found these tiles in a regular DIY store, i.e. B&Q in the UK. These are Johnson bathroom tiles made from porcelain. I am 99% sure this is porcelain from the UK in Cornwall. We actually weirdly have high quality porcelain, which is odd, as normally we have nothing in this country. These are 7mm thick, so the right thickness, and incredibly cheap. The negative is I can't get these in hexagons, so I'll have to custom strip these for the armour. But because I've made the armour to mainly be made out of just single curves, or single curves overlapping to get complicated shapes like the chest or the knees, I will be able to use these in the suit. So while it's not ideal at the minute, it is an option that will work, and it will actually make the whole project a lot cheaper because these are about £10 a box. And with how much a box has done so far, I think I'll only have to spend about £50 on these ceramics to cover the entire suit. So we're making some square targets like we did in the last video, but instead of hexagons, they'll be lined with these. Most of the targets will have 2 layers of these tiles. Some will have 1, and 1 or 2 will probably have multiple more layers to see how effective they actually are. There are of course way better tiles you can get than just regular porcelain tiles like aluminium oxide tiles, or there's silicon carbide tiles and a litany of other synthetic variants. Problem is, I'm trying to do this so I'm making it in the UK and I can only seem to be able to import those in. The expense also goes up quite a lot compared to these. But another thing with this suit that I'll probably explain in another video is I'm really trying to make like the M4 Sherman tank of power armour, not the King Tiger. So the idea is this design can be used and upgraded as technology, as materials improve, but you can also use lower end of materials that are still successful and still actually function as required. As for the rest of the composites going into the armour, in the previous videos in my other attempts I've typically had a middle layer between the ceramics. Because of the increased thickness of the ceramics in this video, and how I want to keep that casing size at 20mm and not really go any higher, I'm not bothering with the middle layer. I don't think it does a great deal, and it's just going to take up space. I'd rather have a thicker layer on the backing plate. So we'll be trying some Kevlar weave put into it. We're also going to try some denim just to see what it does. We're going to try 2 different types of resins. We're going to try an epoxy resin that's obviously going to be quite hard, and then a polyurethane resin that's a medium soft resin. We're also going to be backing one in plastic, as well as trying some tyre, which I kind of hope this doesn't work because it's a pain in the ass to cut. But with how tough tyre is with the braided steel running through the tyre, I thought it might be a good catching layer at the back. And lastly, I do want to put some thin sheets of metal in there, try to mix some metal into those backing sheets to see if it makes a difference at all. People often say, why don't you just use steel instead of a composite armor? The problem is just weight, really. Like, even though it's on an exoskeleton, even though it's power armor and everything, you've still kind of got to keep weight in mind a bit. And the trouble is, for the thickness of 20mm of this composite armor, weight-wise, it's the same as having 3.5mm steel, which, as you can imagine, isn't really going to do anything against high-velocity rounds. So I've ended up with this spare steel that is 0.5mm thick. It's actually silicon steel, but I've got it spare. So I'm going to lace that into it. In the future, I could go up to 1mm steel without a massive, outrageous weight increase. Ooh, and I'm also going to be experimenting with some glass. So in the last video for the eye ports for the helmet, I tested some 10mm polycarbonate. That did stop 22LR, but I want to see if I can stop some more. So I did get hold of some glass, cut to size, and then I'm going to mount that onto some more polycarbonate, and we're going to see if that stops any more. And lastly, just before we get into actually building these plates and testing them, I'm going to have to do my regular disclaimer on this, as I am in the UK. Now, last year I did actually try to get into military development programs with this. I tried to get onto funding programs, not just for the money side, but for things like this, because this would be much easier to test if I was actually part of some form of program. But due to me basically being one man in a shed, they weren't particularly interested. Now, it's not illegal to make armour in the UK, body armour, anything like that. I'm essentially just giving targets for people to shoot, but nevertheless, I won't actually be showing any guns in this video just to be on the safe side because I'm in the UK right now. And it does also mean we're a little bit limited on calibers. So the two calibers we've got today is 222 SP and 308 in FMJ. My main target with this suit is to just about stop 5.56 on all of the extremities apart from the chest, and then have the chest stop something bigger like 308. That is my current target, and the way I look at it is in the future, if I fit it with better materials, with aluminium oxide tiles, whatever else, I should easily be able to stop a lot more. So with that said, please like, subscribe, and we'll get building these plates. To start with, we've got the denim and the Kevlar pieces, each with 2 layers of ceramic in each target, with around 6 layers of each material backing it. The denim and one of the Kevlars will have the softer polyurethane resin, and then the other Kevlar will have the epoxy. There's then also the tyre pieces, so we're going to have one with 1 layer of ceramic and a tyre. That's because the tyre is actually quite thick, so I wouldn't be able to use 2 layers of ceramic everywhere. And then there'll be one with 2 layers, and I think I'll put one of those metal plates into that as well. But for now, we'll build up one of these targets with 2 layers of ceramic and a 3mm plastic sheet of polypropylene at the back of it, all with the softer polyurethane resin. You can also see I'm overlapping the ceramic tiles on each layer, which I will be able to do on the full suit so there's no gaps from the joining pieces. And just to clarify, we've got 2mm of the 3D printed armour casing, or in this case target, and then 2 7mm layers of ceramics, leaving 3 to 4mm of backing material. And then the next one that I'll show you is the thicker plate. This is going to have 4 layers of ceramic with one of those thin metal sheets backing it, and a 9mm piece of polypropylene glued to the back of it, all with that softer resin as well. This aiming to stop the 308. And then for the other one with the steeling, I'm actually using 2 halves because frankly it's what I had spare, but they do overlap in the middle, so we'll try aim in the middle to see what happens on that overlapping piece. That being the one backed with the tyre. As for those eye ports for the helmet, we've got some 6mm piece of glass here, nicely cut to 200mm. And then we've got some 10mm polycarbonate again. I'll cut 2 squares out of it and then bond them onto the glass. That way we can see what difference the glass actually makes. So I'll get sawing and then gluing. Unfortunately, I do not own a reciprocating saw, which I was regretting quite a lot at this point. I'm using the polyurethane resin in the hopes that when the bullet hits the glass actually stays on with it being softer. I'm also trying to get it as clear as possible, but I am in quite a dusty garage, so I can only do what I can do. I did find I had to slide it around a bit on the resin to try and get all of the bubbles out of it, but I don't think the result ended up too bad. And that is the eye port glass ready to test. I have just taped the other layer of 10mm polycarbonate on, mainly so I can just separate it off easy afterwards. As for weight, it does weigh 1.5 kilograms, so it is quite heavy. Of course, obviously the eye ports aren't really this big, and I don't really intend on having the second layer of 10mm polycarbonate on the finished helmet, but I do want to see what difference it makes. So before we go out shooting, we'll do a little recap of what we've got to shoot today. So on the thinner end, we've got the one layer of ceramic with the tyre on the back of it, and then we've got the 2 layers of ceramic with the tyre on the back of it. And then we have the 2 layers of ceramic with a piece of plastic on the back of it, polypropylene, I believe. That being bonded on with the soft resin. And then we have the 2 pieces, both with 2 layers of ceramic added on with Kevlar, but one with the epoxy resin and one with the soft resin, that being the polyurethane resin. And then to make a good comparison, we also have the denim, which is 2 layers of ceramic with the layers of denim on the back, good comparison against Kevlar. And then finally we have the thick plate with the 4 layers of ceramic, polypropylene on the back, as well as the little sheet of metal as well. And of course the glass we've just looked at. And after finishing that filming, I thought I'd better weigh all of these off as a comparison. So the tyre with 1 layer of ceramic is 1200 grams. The tyre with 2 layers of ceramic is just shy of 2 kilos. Both of the Kevlar plates are around 1250 with no real difference between the resins. And the denim plate actually weighs about the same as well, which is unsurprising with how thin the backing plate is. With the plastic backed one also weighing around 1250. And then with the big 4 layer one weighing 2.7 kilos. So let's get testing and we'll review these afterwards. Tyre with 1 layer of ceramic, which I imagine this is going to blow straight through. And yeah, straight through. Tyres aren't bulletproof, surprisingly. 2 layers ceramic with a tyre. Good shooting. And it has appeared to have stopped it. That is with the metal. Ooh. I just need to pause this mid-edit because it all gets a bit frantic when I'm there trying to get the pieces shot and everything. And I didn't pause on this part long enough. So it was clear on that plate that that tyre did basically nothing. It wasn't really bonded on that well. And I don't even think it did anything as like a backing or pressed up it. It was the ceramic and the steel that stopped it. Now later on you'll see how I reuse these steel plates just to experiment to see what the difference is. But you can see the 2 pieces here. The other holes will make sense soon, but you can see the bulge in the center, and that's where that round hit, like so. And you can see it did stop it. It did just start to pull and fracture the bottom plate, but then the top plate stayed intact. So that would have actually stopped that round just with the ceramic and these 2 steel plates bonded on. And that bonding becomes key later on. Back to it with the 2 layers with the plastic backing. This did go through, although you can see that the ceramic is working and slow it down. It's just the plastic really didn't do much at all. And then with the Kevlar backing with the epoxy. So this did go through, although the divot on the wood did seem to be shallower than it did on the plastic, so maybe the Kevlar's a little bit better. You can tell by the size of the divot that it is actually slowing the round down as it goes through. So I think the ceramic's now doing its job, it's just the backing plate isn't. Next up is the Kevlar with the polyurethane. This did appear to work a bit better because I think the polyurethane resin is allowing the fibres to pull a bit more, but nevertheless it did go through, and this is where I was starting to think, right, I don't think any layered composites are going to work for this backing plate just because they're not thick enough. Next up was denim. It was a similar deal as you can predict. I really think you need to be aiming for 5 to 10 millimeters of any of these woven fabric composites if you're wanting them to stop any shrapnel coming through. And of course my 3 to 4 millimeters just isn't quite going to cut it. I've now got the 2 Kevlar pieces with the polyurethane at the front, and I'm going to put it behind the epoxy to see how far in the bullet actually goes. And that did stop on the second plate. It went deep into the Kevlar, appeared to stop about at the ceramic layer. So again, you can imagine if you had 10 millimeters of Kevlar, that probably would have stopped it. But moving on to the most interesting piece, the glass and the polycarbonate. Interesting. Hey! Fucking stopped it, hasn't it? Stopped it. We'll look at this interesting one in more detail later. For now, it's time to test the 308 plate. Now I'm going to put 2 plates behind it in case it goes all the way through, so then we can see where it stops. And it'll also help just kind of to hold it up, which it turns out it needed. Now at first, due to the violence, I thought this had gone straight through it, but it turns out it did actually stop it, but the force just shattered the plates behind it. Upon further examination, it has actually stopped it. It stopped in the metal, and then just riveted the polypropylene. Yeah. But the force then went into this and broke this, so you definitely break all your ribs. Anyway, to test this steel out better, I'm going to take some of the steel from the previous plates and then put them onto this one with the 2 layers of ceramic that isn't too badly damaged. That's it onto the corner, so we'll see how it goes. So, badly taped together, we're going to aim for about here, which gives us 3 layers of the 0.5mm steel. This, for reference, is back with the 222. And it has just gone through it, which I'll explain back in the studio. And we are back for the post-testing review, and we're going to start with the most interesting looking one, and that is the glass. I feel like I should frame this on my wall. This surprisingly stopped 222, shattered very interestingly. And if we just gently rotate it over so the glass doesn't fall out, you can see how it stopped it on the back, and you can just see the bullet actually poking through. So that is 2 layers of 10mm polycarbonate, fronted with 6mm of glass on the front, which I assume is a form of table glass, some form of toughened glass, especially with how it shattered. That softer resin as well largely kept hold of it all. Parts of it are falling out, but a lot of this is still actually glued to the polycarbonate. I don't think I can make the glass in the helmet, of course, 26mm thick. I think it's just going to end up being polycarbonate with some glass at the front of it. So it'll at least stop 22. But probably not 222 when it's in the helmet, or 556 for that matter. But that's good to know. It's a good starting point for anything that I might want to do in the future, making bulletproof glass. Moving on to the 2 Kevlar pieces now. I've got them close up. You can see how the polyurethane allowed the Kevlar to fray a bit before snapping, whereas if anything, the epoxy resin helped to cut the Kevlar once it had some force against it. You can also see that extra divot on the epoxy from when I had the 2 panels put together. And again, as said earlier, there's just not enough Kevlar here to do it. I'd need at least double thickness for it to be worthwhile. And while of course for the denim to have stopped it would have needed a lot more layers than the Kevlar, it was kind of a similar deal, just not enough thickness. As for the plate with a single layer of ceramic and the tyre at the back of it, it's not that the tyre did nothing, but it didn't do enough, especially for how much it weighs. It did just pass straight through there and out of the other side. And then as for this ceramic plate, this is the backing plate for the 308 plate, so that's why there's this big corner missing. But you can see with that softer resin, again, it did actually try to hold the pieces of ceramic together. That being another plus point of that resin. And then if we go on to the second tyre piece, the tyre piece that had the 2 layers of ceramic into it, as seen in the testing, it didn't breach the tyre, but it didn't actually even try with the tyre. It didn't even really mark the tyre at the back of it. I'm pretty sure the tyre did nothing. These being the 2 steel plates that were behind it. Those outer holes, of course, from the later experiment, with the center big divot being from this one. You can kind of see how it would line up. That did just about stop it. There is a slight rupture there, but it does appear to have stopped it completely. And I think, again, the key with this is the resin bonded it on, and the bonding of the resin onto the plate also creates like a hard backstop for the ceramic, which makes it harder for the bullet to basically push through the ceramic on the back. This is one of the few intact remaining plates where we can see the damage to the ceramic. So you can see how it does localise. It does spread onto different tiles. This is where it's not as good as having those little hexagons, because the hexagons do limit the damage from going further out. I don't think you'd have had this much damage to the tiles if it was hexagonal. But again, as we talked about earlier, there's not a great deal I can do about that. There is, though, if we get up close, an interesting spiral pattern kind of stepped around the edge. I wonder if that's from the rotation of the bullet as it goes in, causing the ceramic to break off in those steps. But either way, ballistics is always weird and interesting. And then we've got the plastic plate, which didn't do much either. I didn't really think it would. I thought the ceramic would have to pretty much stop the round dead for this plastic to even do anything, but it was worth a try. See how it punched through it nicely. Made quite a big hole, actually. And then if we look at the ceramic, we have the 2 holes. So the center hole is, of course, for that plastic, and then this outer hole is for those pieces of steel that I added on at the last minute. mid-testing. So we had these two pieces folded over like so, over there, and then the other bigger piece there as well. And as you can see, it did punch straight through these three, which is confusing to say this double sheet stopped it earlier. I think the reason why these sheets didn't do anything is just because they weren't bonded together, and it allowed a gap to exist between this and the steel. That does two things. One, it means there isn't like a backing plate for this to help hold the ceramic in place that bit better. And it means that these panels aren't actually bonded together, so it makes the shrapnel, whatever's left, easier to punch through. That's my theory anyway. The only other thing I think it could be is the backing plate of tyre and plastic, but I struggle to see how they did anything, as they did just kind of pop off. And then lastly, we've got the 308 plate, the big plate. As you can see, 308 caused some absolute destruction. Hit the bottom quarter around here, and then it did demolish the tiles. But very, very surprisingly, it did stop on this metal here. Kind of see where it landed there. So it did mean that it definitely stopped that 308 dead by the time it came through all of that. With this all planning to be mounted to an exoskeleton, so the weight isn't exactly on the operator, you should actually be fine underneath this, but if this was a plate on a plate carrier, you're definitely wrecked for the day. As for the polypropylene plate mounted to the back, I didn't even get to see if it would stop anything, because it basically didn't get touched. There's maybe a little divot on the back that I can feel, but I can't really see it. Turns out it only needed a thin steel plate on the back of it and 4 layers of ceramic. Now I've waffled on, what's next? So after all that, what is my conclusion? What am I going to fill this armour casing with? Well, when I can't make my own custom hexagonal tiles, I think I've really got to go with these. It's the right thickness, and it has proved to be able to bring those intermediate cartridges really down to a slow walking pace by the time they get through 2 layers of this. And while it's not ideal them being strips and I can't get hexagons, with the shape of the armour and everything, I can get away with it, so that shouldn't be a problem. As for the backing plate, due to the thickness I can have, I think it's pointless doing anything like Kevlar. I think really it's got to be a metal. Whether I go for a thin steel or a thin aluminium is yet to be decided. So when it comes to the aluminium, I can go up to 3mm thick, which on this test plate from a while ago proved to be basically as effective as a thin piece of steel. But because of the weight issues with the steel, I can only really go up to 1mm thick. 3mm aluminium is basically the same weight as 1mm of, say, stainless steel. However, when this is just some very cheap silicon steel that I bought off AliExpress that is 0.5mm thick, I like to think a decent quality stainless steel 1mm thick will be much better than this. And that should help to stop 556, which is, if anything, a little bit better penetration than 222. Albeit they are very close. The main question I've got to answer as to whether I use the aluminium or the steel is how well I can get each one of them cut. So on my CNC machine, while it is very slow, I can cut aluminium, but I can't do steel, so I'll have to get the steel cut somewhere else. Which I think that is my preferred option. I've also got to decide whether I put in holes for bolts. So if you're coming closer to here, taking a look at the exoskeleton, which the build videos are on the channel if you are new, the vast majority of it is out of carbon fibre, and it's out of multiple pieces of carbon fibre to allow for adjustment in and out. These are held together with M5 bolts, and these M5 bolts also double as the attachment points for the armour. This is the best, most reliable way to do it in my opinion. However, it does mean that there needs to be some form of nut insert in the armour pieces, which in this case need to be attached to that backing plate. So the question is, do I have this 1mm sheet of steel or 3mm aluminium bonded to the ceramic with or without holes, with or without riv nuts or T-nuts mounted into them? Because I could have nuts mounted into the steel, or I could say have Kevlar or some top anti-spalling coating bonded to the steel with the nuts in. I think that's probably the best way, but what do you guys think? Feel free to put in the comments down below any ideas or what you reckon would be best. That about brings us to the end of the video. I think in the next video, I'll probably do a video of how I'm trying to make this more like an M4 Sherman than a King Tiger. Probably while I start to build some of the armour up. I've also got some electroplating to do for some electronic actuator parts. So this project should finally be complete in the next month or so. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, hope it was informative, and I hope to see you on the next one. And last of all, have a great day.